Oh,
Howdy.
everyone. Yeah. No, last week we were on the wrong day.
Epic streak. Hi, guys. How's it going today? Ooh, okay. Let's try and round that down to 5 minutes. Grandparents had the original trilogy on a Laserdisc, like those Laserdisc remasters or whatever that came out in the early 90s. I was born in 1990, so I know that the first time I saw a Star Wars movie was A New Hope, and I don't remember what age I was. It was probably I was 6 months old, and my dad was holding me or whatever. But let's see here. My first real memory of Star Wars was when I was, Lord, 6 years old, excuse me. And the special editions came out. And I remember going to some crappy, theater in Elk Grove, Illinois. It's like the absolutely horrible 90s, seating and tiny little screen for, a theater, especially in modern theater nowadays. And I don't necessarily remember actually watching the movie. I remember, I remember walking out of the theater and looking up to my dad and going, "That was amazing." That's all that I really remember of it.
Yeah.
And I was hooked. I ended up watching those Laserdiscs over and over and over again. As soon as the special edition VHSs came out, my dad bought those, and I ended up watching those over and over and over again. And then Phantom Menace came out, and Phantom Menace was really like the real kickoff for my Star Wars fandom. Like, I get it. Some people don't like the prequels. That's fine. But I've always felt like I'm borrowing the original trilogy from my uncle's generation and my dad's generation, whereas the Phantom Menace was mine. That was my Star Wars.
Right.
Yep.
And so, and then I just ended up I delved into the expanded universe. I read all the X-Wing books and stuff like that, and I was kind of a mid-tier fan. I don't like tiering the fans, but I was, somewhere between less involved and very involved. And then once Disney bought out Lucasfilm, I just went completely ham. Once the Force Awakens hype train started in 2014, end of 2014, I was sold. And now I'm here.
Well, you're among friends here. I know not everyone kind of felt the same way, but I got excited because to what you were saying about feeling like, you're borrowing Star Wars. I've never really thought about it that way, but that resonates with me too. But for me, once the reboot happened, even though I'd been into the Legends EU and stuff, this really felt like a way to kind of get in on the ground floor in important ways. And I've really enjoyed that too. I will say too, apparently my mic wasn't YouTube and Twitter and Twitch, and he has a podcast. You can see all that information there on the screen. Also, but anything else we wanted to talk about before we get into Last Shot?
No, I'm excited to talk about this book. I finished it in a timely manner that was not up until the last moment at all. And having had plenty of time to fully digest it, I'm ready to dive in.
All right. Well, we will say too that Andy has already covered this on his channel, so he has some reviews over there that we would encourage you to go check out. Not just for The Last Shot, but all of his content.
Well, thank you very much.
So So if you're coming here from his stuff, this may be a recap if you've already seen his videos. But I don't know.
Oh no,
so
I
much...
have many more thoughts now that I've had 2 weeks to be sitting there at work going, hey, wait a minute.
Wait. Well, you got it on audio, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's pretty much how I have all of my Star Wars reading experiences, is just because I work like a 45, 50 hour a week job.
Right.
So really the only time that I have, if I want to also make videos and stream and everything like that, actually have, real life relationships with friends and family and, my fiance and stuff. I need to listen to them on audiobook. So that's really how I got into it. And the audiobook for Last Shot is, at least in my opinion, incredible. I loved it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the audiobook is actually narrated. Well, I guess we can do a quick recap of how the book is structured.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 3 different timelines that you're following. The main timeline is 3 years after Return of the Jedi.
Yes.
Then you have 10 years before A New Hope.
Santa being a character from the Star Wars main comic by Marvel.
Yes. And then you also have a Lando and L3 story happening. Yep, there's your Han era.
Lando one.
Yeah, and then the Lando one with L3 takes place before Solo.
Yep.
And really, you end up jumping back to those previous times. I wouldn't say in flashbacks, but more like contextualizations for understanding what's happening in between Han and Lando.
There's distinctly less Lando chapters than any other, I think.
Which is really a shame because young Lando is fantastic.
Yeah, those were some of the ones I was enjoying. Then there's actually the 4th one, kind of, with the villain.
Oh yeah, that's right. There's because I don't actually read his name, I never remember it.
Oh, it's Fyzen Gore, was that it?
Yep.
So if you look at this here, you'll note the other ones had like a black dot in their time period, and his don't.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
And the way the audiobook is actually done, where in this really clever way that I didn't really think would work, but then it worked perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
The main storyline that's happening post Return of the Jedi is narrated by the one and only Mark Thompson.
Okay.
Much,
he does like every audiobook ever.
Yeah, well, not quite. Yeah, I mean, he does. He's probably the most recognizable one. Yeah. Then there's also Jonathan Davis and January O'Voy. But then there's also the Han Chewie Santa story is narrated by Daniel José Older, the author of the book. And then and then the Lando and L3 stuff is narrated by January O'Voy. Okay. So it's really useful for me because when I'm, sitting there working or whatever, when I'm just listening to it, I can kind of understand where they're coming from.
Right.
Okay, I just by who's talking, I can be like, oh, we're at this point in the timeline.
Gotcha.
That's really cool.
That's really cool. Yeah.
And I will say too, one of my real sort of I think I would have liked a little more of the Lando stuff, just because I feel like I don't know new canon Lando as well as I know new canon Han. But I thought they were each, even like the stuff on Utapau where it was just the Fyzen Gore story, like with the medical student being dragged out into the wilderness. Like I thought even that was compelling to me, and I thought it was done really well. The pacing got weird sometimes for me. I think there were moments, and I don't know, maybe this is different in the audiobook if you're listening to it. But for me, there were times where I really kind of had to think about what was going on, just because it was so fast paced. Not that was necessarily a bad thing, that it was fast paced, because it made it a quick read for me. But all in all, I thought it all was interwoven well, but in a way that was not just about the larger story, but that made each individual component of it enjoyable also.
Yeah, I appreciated the fast-pacedness of it. Where I kind of struggled with it was I got this book like when it came out, and I started reading it the weekend after it came out and finished it last night. So I was reading it over a longer span of time. So there'd be times where I'd come back to it and go, wait, how did they know to go to that place again? Whatever, they're going to this place. And then I would just kind of go with it. I think that was my own fault for reading it over a long span of time.
Yeah, I think that's a fair criticism, though, because I'm fortunate enough that, you know, I work 10, 12-hour shifts, so
right.
And I can listen to an audiobook pretty much the entire time, so I can burn through an audiobook in one shift. Whereas in the medium of actually reading a novel, just the logistics and real life implications of that is that it takes time. And so, yeah, there might be, I could see where some people are coming from when they say that, you know, it's a little bit too fast paced to the point where you kind of have to go back and reread a couple of chapters before you understand what's going on.
Right. I think too, I know this is something that Jess struggled with getting into the book a little bit, but I think one of the reasons it spoke so well to me, and I'd be interested, honestly, to know, I should have looked this up, I guess, how old Daniel José Older is, because I felt like maybe it's just the point in life where I am personally, but like seeing Han, like I've never really identified myself in Han Solo before the way that I felt like I was able to in this book. That, I mean, I was talking to some other people on Facebook that read the book, and they really said that they didn't like this characterization of Han, but I like seeing Han trying to be an adult and not knowing what to do. Even apart from, again, the stuff that goes on in the story, just that notion of he has a toddler now, and he has to figure out how to be a dad with a toddler and still be Han Solo and still, you know, be married to one of the leaders of the New Republic, and like figuring out who he is and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, in this book, I think that the characterizations were just perfectly on point, at least for me. And this book almost felt like a Legends novel in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Yes, that's what I would say.
Yeah, it looked. It's just like it had the weirdness of it. Apologies, the fiance just yelled that she was leaving, so I got thrown off. But yeah. One thing that I like about Star, like my favorite OT film is Return of the Jedi, and while I agree, I think that Empire is objectively, I don't believe in objectively good or bad Star Wars,
right?
Or any art form, but I think objectively Empire is the best. But I like Return of the Jedi more because it has that it doesn't take itself as seriously as Empire does. It's still just as mythical and just as timeless of a story as Empire, but it doesn't take itself so serious.
I would completely agree.
And that's one thing that I really liked about this book in particular, is that there were certain really goofy things that I'm sure we'll get into when we get into the spoiler section. That just like made me go, wait, what? That doesn't make any. You know what? It doesn't matter if it doesn't make any sense.
Just go with it.
Just go with it. It's Star Wars. Just have some fun.
And I that's how I felt too, because like I didn't have like a problem with the now time period being a couple years after Jedi. Like I didn't have a problem with Han's characterization in that I thought it was wrong. Like I thought it was correct. It's probably, as weird as it sounds, it was probably the version of Han I was least interested in. But like, I didn't have a problem with it. Like not every Star Wars book at every point in time has to be written for what I'm interested in, and that's completely fine. But like Han and the pre-A New Hope Han, I was loving every part of that storyline. And that's honestly, I think one of the stronger parts of the book is there's kind of there's a storyline in there for anyone, no matter how the storyline I was most interested in was the villains, which again we can get into more when we're trying to keep it spoiler free for now, but when we kind of get into the nitty gritty, that was probably the one that was most interesting to me. But that's also because I'm more interested in the big galactic things than the small scale stuff when it comes to Star Wars.
Well,
I see. Yeah, go ahead, Django.
I was just gonna say, when I started this book, I remember I was texting Jess about it, because honestly, this is one of the few books that really made me laugh out loud, like literally, as I was starting to read it. And for it to be such a serious thing at times, like, you know, I mean, obviously we know it's not going to happen because the Force Awakens exists, but when the barista coffee making droid was about to kill toddler Ben Solo, like it's this like serious moment where there's about to be a droid revolution, but also there's Mon Mothma making jokes about seeing Han shirtless. And
and
I think we just hit the spoiler portion of this podcast.
Well, it was coming one way or another. But
I'm just half dying over here. I apologize.
But it was just I loved how it was able to balance those tones to have something, and I think Return of the Jedi is a fair comparison to it, to where it has something, you know, very serious and galaxy spanning going on, but it also has these really small, like, humorous moments. Like, I really liked when they were on the I forget the name of the world, but it was the prison place where they were when they were staging the prison break or whatever, or to get the information about Fiz and Gore, and they're fighting those like creatures. Like, that felt like a really fun Star Wars moment to me also.
Like what were they, the blaster eating thing?
Yeah,
they just eat blaster bolts. You can find those in the wild? What? But okay, whatever. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and that felt like you were saying how it felt kind of like a Legends novel. It kind of reminded me of when I read the Thrawn trilogy for the first time, and we're like, yeah, there's these salamanders that repel the Force, and then there's these dogs that can smell the Force, and you're like, sure.
Okay, why not? Sure.
We'll go with it.
Yeah. Although, I will be fair, that's the one thing that I'm crazy, like, rabid fanboyish.
Yeah.
For anybody that's, you know, meeting me for the first time, I'm crazy rabid fanboyish. I will actually riot if anything that messes with how the Force, if anything that is just like, it doesn't affect, it's not affected by the Force.
Yeah.
Is brought in by the new that's the one thing that I'm like fanboyishly, unapologetically, and just no, things need to be affected by the Force. I love the Yuzong Vong. I will take that biotech crap all day, every day.
Right.
But the Force has to be able to affect it. Sorry.
It's funny that you bring up the Vong. So, kind of getting into some of what you could kind of call a spoiler from the book. So there's this droid uprising, but there's these droids that like they get like alien arms, like there's the droids that have Wookiee arms or whatever, and they want to do this revolution. And there was a part of me that just really, I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I wanted the end of the book to like hint that these droids were going to go off into the unknown regions, and they were going to be the droid race that like caused the Yuzon Vong to freak out and like want to attack everything. Like, I wanted that so bad to like have these be those droids. But it didn't happen. But in my own little world for right now, the Yuzon Vong can still exist, and this is the droid race that goes on to cause galactic problems.
I mean, and I really like too the whole like droid cult thing that was going on.
Yeah,
like,
I loved that.
Like, I love the scenes on Utapau where you got like Fiz and Gore, the medical student, who's like, hey, I want to make people live longer, so let me shove some human parts on a droid, because droids live a long time, but humans are also kind of cool, or I guess organic parts, not
organics,
human. But, so it's like, you know, the way we usually see like cyborgs work in the Star Wars universe is you've got an organic guy that's got a metal arm, you know, a robot arm, or, you know, Darth Vader in his suit, or even General Grievous or something like that. But this was like the other way around, and so I thought that was an interesting like subversion of that. But then by the time we got to the droid cult, like I was completely sold. I loved that idea.
I love, my favorite part of Star Wars for me is always like the mysticism and like the bigger mythology kind of thing. So it was so cool to kind of see that notion, but applied to droids. like instead of the Force. It was just like, no, there's this grand destiny for droids that will rise up, and I loved it. And I loved like the crazy cultist people who just I don't know.
Yeah, some of the world building that they're doing in the new canon with the like the prequels kind of exploded the world or the galaxy out to like a macro level, but now with this new canon, all the like post Return of the Jedi stuff that we've gotten in between the Empire's End and Bloodline and now this, you know, it's just completely blown up to this point where it's just like, whoa, there's all these crazy weird Force cults and all these crazy weird droid cults, and whoa, okay, so this is how that government works and that's how that government works. I love it. I'm absolutely loving it.
It's been really fun to see. And like even stuff like with L3 who's searching for droid rights and stuff, it just adds all these layers to all these things that are going on in the galaxy.
I mean, and I feel like that's something that's always been there kind of under the surface in Star Wars, is like this notion of, you know, how sentient are droids supposed to be, like how much are we supposed to treat them like people. I mean, because that was kind of the part of the meta story about the Clone Wars too, is that you had two armies that were essentially indispensable fighting a war on behalf of other people. But so I like this notion of, you know, how important are droids, and it almost became like a dystopian sort of novel, you know. But so the point of that was supposed to be like, oh, these things that you take for granted because they're part of your everyday life, and like even when you look at Han's, you know, argument with the droid that just wants to make him coffee, like you can see how
Han plus protocol droids is always the best thing you can ever do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially when they're just broadcasting Mon Mothma to you in the middle of the night, trying not to wake up your kid.
I know Django feels the same way as I do, but like the best verb ever came out of this book, and that was Mon Mothma-ing. I laughed so hard when I read that.
Don't remember that. That must have.
It was really early. It was really early, and it was during that phone call, and Han was like, and then there's Mon Mothma-ing all over the place.
Oh, yeah. You gotta be so regal and upright.
Made me laugh.
That was fantastic. Now I remember where that's coming from. Yeah, that
really
good. It felt like the beginning of a Legends novel. It really did. It's just like it's just like something weird's happening, and now people need to go and do stuff. Oh, okay, we're gonna go do stuff now. Whee! And then we went on a 12-hour adventure or whatever.
And there was like a techno hacking Ewok, because why not? A lot of this book just felt. A lot of this book, in a good way, felt like, cause why not?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a lot of love for just the it's Star Wars. Let it be fun. It's okay.
Yep.
Well, and what was the name of the character that was like the gangster who was like the pint-sized gangster, and then all of his family was in like
I can't remember.
In the suits.
The little guy,
that Sana had in a box.
He made me think of that bounty hunter from Clone Wars. I don't know if it's the same species.
Yeah.
But there was like a little teeny guy. You know, I say I'm gonna look, and this is a big book, and he's in only a couple of chapters. Was it Korg? No, this is a Lando chapter, so it can't be right. Hold on. Whatever.
Nah, yeah, I think Korg was like some guy in the bar or whatever where we first meet Lando before he goes off with L3.
Yeah, that could be. I think. There's a lot of people. There are a lot of people. So many fun little things.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, what other either little or big moments from the book, like, did you enjoy?
I liked the way I liked the kind of resolution to the Lando backstory. And it was one of those things where I was getting really annoyed's not the right word, but I was like, why did we all of a sudden just stop getting young Lando chapters, like just out of nowhere?
Right.
And then we get to the end of the book, and I figured out why. And you figure out what L3's like secret plan was, and then how she both does but also doesn't show up at the end of the book and like
Right.
made an army of herself. Although I noticed they conveniently just don't mention what L3's fate is in the Solo movie.
Sure.
Yeah, that's one reason why I tell friends of mine and stuff that like, and they're like bigger spoiler phobes than I am.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, maybe hold off on reading this book until you go see Solo, because Solo or Last Shot doesn't tell us anything.
Right.
But I have a lot of gut feelings as to what happens in Solo now.
Yeah.
You know, so I kind of like, oh, I know that character is discussed.
Yep.
And that character in particular is not discussed.
Yep.
And that character is thought about, and that character isn't thought about. So I'm kind of like, oh, I kind of already know what's going to happen to some of these. Maybe. I don't actually know, but for now, you know. And yeah, and back to the original question though, Django, where yes, just favorite little things. Two things, and those are just both Lando and Han moments, where number one, Lando straight decking Han at the beginning of the book was hilarious. That was my laugh out loud moment. Can't say why, just was. Because violence is funny, I guess. And, the moment in between Lando and Han where like, I don't remember the exact lines, but it's like Lando says something and Han goes, yeah, I know. And then that immediately recontextualizes into the whole betrayal on Cloud City and everything like that. And just like seeing those two characters, both those characters kind of acknowledge it, especially considering that both these characters run away from themselves all the time.
Yep.
Seeing them having to turn back and acknowledge what happened to them and how weird it was, and they kind of have to face back. They kind of have to put that to bed in between each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Was a really powerful character moment.
Yeah.
And I liked with that scene too is it shows what I think we're going to presumably see in Solo, but I don't know that for a fact, is that Han and Lando were at some level friends at some time before Empire Strikes Back. And because I think you could watch Empire Strikes Back and wonder, were they friends or were they just people that were around each other all the time, who worked together all the time? Where it would be a betrayal, but not a super unexpected one. Because on the surface, it's like it's two smugglers and one of them betrayed the other one. Like, is that really that weird? But what I liked about it was that it showed that these guys had enough of a bond, even if they hadn't talked in a while,
right?
To where he wouldn't have expected Lando to turn him in.
Yeah, for sure. That's one really nice thing that I'm enjoying with this new canon is that they're kind of hitting all demographics of viewers, readers, whatever.
Yes.
With different characters. You've got the people like me who are getting out of young adult life and into adult life, and having to learn how to be an adult, and that how failures work and how you're always going to screw up, and the best thing to do is to pass those lessons from those failures on to the next generation.
Right.
And seeing Han struggle with fatherhood and seeing Lando having to deal with his own emotions is really powerful to me. But then you look at what happens in Rebels, and Ezra's journey, and that's going to speak to my 12-year-old little sister,
right?
And you're going to see, and then you look at Rey from the movies, and that's going to speak to a college age kid, and that's just that's one thing that at least I personally absolutely love that Lucasfilm is doing with this whole new canon.
Right.
Yep.
Another, I guess it counts as a smaller thing that I really enjoyed about this was just how the Falcon is used in this, because it's more than just this ship, which I feel like for a lot of people the Falcon has always been more than just the ship. But I love, because especially since I feel like a lot of I don't say a lot, but at least part of the hesitancy of that people have about Solo is, this is not the Falcon that I know. I don't.
Right.
You know, and like Han even says at one point, like, this is obviously too clean. Like, it doesn't look like anybody lives here. This is too pristine. Or like the moments where Lando would go into like his special cape closet and like trying to decide like what the right color cape was to wear.
That was beautiful too.
And I don't know, I know Jess is sort of stopped watching some of the Solo tie-in stuff on YouTube, but there was a video where Donald Glover does like a tour of the Millennium Falcon, and he goes into the cape room, and I'm like, oh, it's the cape room. Like I read that in the book.
The only thing I know about the soundtrack is there's apparently a track called Lando's Closet or something similar to that, and the fact that it's going to get its own musical piece just makes me really happy.
Yeah. But I love the idea that the Falcon is still very much a character in the story, but it is a very different character when it's Lando's Falcon compared to Han's Falcon, and that's something I'm looking forward to seeing in the film also.
Yeah, I think I really liked how the Falcon served as kind of a bridge in between those three main storylines. You know, we got to see how, you know, the Falcon kind of carries all these characters through this whole journey. And I think that's one problem, like even as a prequel lover myself, that I think that was a problem in the prequels was, this is kind of way off topic from the book, but the prequels didn't have the noble steed that the original trilogy had. Right. It didn't have that home base, that home feel. You know, if they would have just kept that first Nubian cruiser throughout the entire thing, instead of, you know, okay, now Attack of the Clones has got two different ones, and then, you know, you got a third one, and then, you know, you don't really have anything episode 3. If you would have just kept that one first cruiser from episode 1, I think that would have helped to get the audience more into those prequel movies, where you've got, you know, a home base, that this is the safe space for these characters.
Right.
Well, they kind of brought it back with Phasma's armor, right? Joke.
In a but even thinking about that too, so like one of the things,
it's an amused groan, Jess. Don't worry about it.
One of the things that a lot of people got into about this book was the reversible cover.
Yeah.
But even if you look at the reversible cover, like the use of the Falcon is different. And I think even just in the sort of graphic design of the cover for the book, I think they make good use of that kind of difference, because it is an important part of the story, even though they're on other ships at different points in time in the story. It still is an important part of what's going on. And I love too, there was a part of the book where Han is talking about, or maybe probably thinking about, the Falcon, and he's talking about how he intentionally tried to dirty it up, but Chewie keeps trying to clean everything. I love that part too.
Yeah. Although I think Han went a little bit too far trying to dirty it up.
He definitely succeeded.
Yes.
Oh.
And now we'll see what Chewie's / Rey's Falcon will look like. Probably be something completely different.
No, they'll probably put, it's J.J. Abrams coming back. It's going to be the circular dish again. They're going to upgrade it, which is fine. It's fine.
They'll put like a time travel drive instead of a hyperdrive. Then
sounds right.
I think he's just going to be mad that Rebels got to time travel before he did. So this is going to be like his revenge. Like, oh yeah, guys.
If you listen to some of the conspiracy theorists, you're not wrong. Jeez. There are some of these conspiracy theories about Lucasfilm and Disney, and it's like, good lord, what? What? How does your brain work that way? Okay, whatever.
So another thing I thought we could talk about, and this is a pretty minor thing, I guess, in terms of the story of the novel, but I know Jess has feelings about this. What are your thoughts and feelings about either the inclusion or the use of toddler Ben Solo in this book?
Poor Terry got such a rant from me.
Because I got so excited when I read that, just because I was thinking, oh, it's just a sweet and funny moment, you know, I want a cape like Uncle Lando has. And then I got I got
for the
very very deep discussions from my short, hey, this is fun comments to Jess about this.
I made the mistake of starting this book when I was having a bad day. So I was like, I'm having a bad day. I'm going to read the Star Wars book, and the Star Wars book's going to cheer me up. And one of the first couple chapters is toddler Ben Solo, like, playing with Han Solo. And I didn't take it as cute and adorable. Poor Django got like a text rant from me, like, this book is trying to emotionally manipulate me by putting toddler Ben Solo in here. And he's like patting Han where he's going to end up stabbing him later. And it's just trying to manipulate me. And like 2 days later, I was like, I was just in a bad mood. I'm sorry, book.
That's kind of the no, I mean, you're not wrong. That's kind of the point of art in general, is to emotionally manipulate you.
I was just weirdly aware of it that day, and I was like, no, I don't want to be manipulated right now.
That's fantastic.
I mean, but it was
Uncle Wando.
Like the idea that there was a parallel there to The Force Awakens, which is obvious, was completely lost on me because I was just caught up in the cuteness of it. And Jess is like, no, they're trying to make me remember that he murders Han Solo, and I don't like it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's also a thing. But
I think some of that came out of like my pure Kylo obsession. Like, if you can see my Kylo shrine behind me, where I'm like, I know what's going on here.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, Kylo is just this incredible
Oh, he's so good.
character.
Yeah.
He's
So
so
interesting.
yeah. He's so. I know this is sacrilegious to say, but he's so much more compelling than OT Vader is for me.
I mean,
Like as a character, like, I don't know what's going on in his head, and that's what's scary. That's what makes it scarier to me, is that like Vader was lawful evil.
yes.
and Kylo's chaotic evil, and that's what makes Kylo scarier to me.
Well,
And
and one of the things I like about Kylo Ren, and I feel like we really see this play out, and I think we get a hint of this in the Last Shot novel, is, you know, we all have those moments, and for some people it's sadder and more traumatic than others, but everybody has a moment where you realize that your parents aren't perfect, that they're people too. And for Kylo, part of when he realizes this is when his uncle is standing over him with a lightsaber in the middle of the night. But I liked seeing Han struggle with that too. You know, this notion of, I know the kind of person I am, and I know the kind of person he's going to think I'm supposed to be. Like, how can I sort of square that circle and be that person? I mean, it's the same struggle that Luke's having in a lot of ways in The Last Jedi, but I liked that kind of through line there, which we don't get for Vader, because Vader doesn't have a father, and, you know, and his mother gets killed. But for Kylo, I think that's a very normal, if you want to put it that way, sort of part of who his character is, that I think is both important and relatable.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, how do you guys feel about the interesting discourse going on about Han and Leia's parenting in this book?
I think, I mean, Han struggling with being a parent.
Yeah.
I can totally see in some ways. I found less of an issue with Han and more of an issue with Leia, and not in a that she was parenting wrong, but I felt like Leia has been very consistently written in this new canon versus old, and I actually felt like this was the first book where Leia deviated from the image of Leia I had in my head based on the new canon, where Leia seemed way more in control than she has in the other new canon novels. And I don't know if it's because we're not in Leia's head and Leia's putting on like a face for Han so Han can feel better while he's struggling.
Yeah.
Or what. But like,
yeah.
Leia just seemed really okay with everything that was going on in this book. Which
I think you hit on the right point there, which is that Leia does feel a lot more in control in this book.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that you're right that it's because we're not inside of her head. Because there's that one moment where, you know, Han is talking about, you know, like literally last week or whatever, that Leia had basically a panic attack or, you know, just a massive wave of depression because she thought of Alderaan again.
Right.
And, you know, she does just kind of have those moments of weakness. And that's one thing that this book does incredibly well, is that it makes the characters feel like humans or real people.
Right.
Yes.
Every single one of them feels like a real person that has real weaknesses and real problems and real, you know, things going wrong in their head and in their heart that they have to deal with.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Leia is kind of this stoic monument to, you know, this paragon of humanity, but in this book we get to see her have we get to at least see Han describe a moment of weakness from her, and we really needed that. And like, to your point about, you know, the new canon versus the old canon, one thing that this book does really well is the concept of Lando, like older Lando dealing with his feelings for, because I listened to the audiobook and I don't remember the names. Kasha, thank you, the Twi'lek.
Yep.
Him having to deal with those feelings and stuff, it made Lando so much more dynamic than he was, at least to me, in the Legends. Because in the Legends continuity, he never really changed all that much.
He gets married, but he just doesn't change.
Yeah, like young Lando stories and, you know, the young Lando adventures and stuff. Yeah, those are great. But like everything post Return of the Jedi Lando, he doesn't change. He's just
right.
I'm the cooler, more suave, charismatic version of Han Solo for like 30 years of history. Well, you know, whereas he actually kind of deviates into his own character in the new canon with this book.
Well, and one of the things I really appreciated about that Lando arc in the Now story in Last Shot was that the conclusion of that was not necessarily that Lando had to grow up all of a sudden. It's that he could still be himself. He could still be the suave, you know, guy, and still be a grown up. That there, you know, there wasn't a loss of self that he had to undergo in order to have a relationship. He just had to get to a point where he was open to it.
It was effectively as if he figured out all he really had to do was promise not to fool around with anyone else. And like once he figured that out, it was okay.
Right.
Yeah. But for some, that's the thing, is that like looking at it from the outside is that it's easy to see how somebody can fix their problems.
Oh yeah.
You know, and when you're thinking of it inside of your own head and you're not asking for any help, that's when, you know, issues arise, and it takes you way too long to come up with a very simple solution.
Right.
And you know, all the characters in this book have that same, all the main characters in this book have that same kind of problem, where it's like, if Han just does this, all of his problems would be solved. If Lando just does this, all of his problems would be solved.
Right.
It's very relatable, because there's a lot of times where I think to myself, well, if I just did this, all of my problems would be solved. I'm not going to do any of those things,
I know, right?
But I could.
Exactly.
Another question I kind of had, and we kind of danced around this a little bit already, but this is supposed to be kind of the tie-in novel. I know there's some other stuff coming out in the next month.
Yeah.
So how do you think it functions as a tie-in novel, and what did The Last Shot do that makes you more or less excited for Solo?
Okay. Well, let's go with how does it function as a tie-in novel? I think that it isn't necessarily function as a tie-in novel. It's not nearly as comprehensive as or as necessary as, say, Catalyst was to Rogue One.
Catalyst is almost entirely necessary.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. And then I think that Last Shot is much less so. I think that Last Shot really stands on its own 2 feet, and I don't think that it's going to have too much to do with the actual story of Solo, a Star Wars story.
Right.
And as for it, does it make me more or less excited? I'm going to be honest and say that it actually makes me less excited for Solo. I love the book.
Yeah.
I absolutely adore the book, and I've always been ready for a Solo movie. I'm ready for any Star Wars. I'm a brainwashed Disney shill, and so
as our comments like to tell us.
Yes, I like being happy, so I like to actually enjoy things. So even if they're not exactly what I wanted, so I've always been ready for a Solo movie. So I feel like this book gave me those gut feelings and stuff like that I kind of don't want to air because I don't want to put ideas in your guys' head or in the viewers' heads.
Right.
But I have lots of thoughts and feelings, and it makes me worried about what might happen, which doesn't happen to me. I don't get worried about Star Wars movies like a lot of people say that they do, which I get, but I've never really felt that. I've never been like, oh no, what if I don't like it? But there are certain things that I've kind of expected them to do just because those are the trope. That's what you would do in this kind of story with the kind of cast that you have going on, the cast of characters. And this book kind of reinforced some of those ideas, and I don't want those things to happen in the movie. So I'm a little I hope that they don't do that, but they probably will. It'll be okay if they don't. It'll be okay if they do it, but I'm also not super excited if they do.
Right.
I feel like with this, for me, it's kind of weird because going into The Force Awakens, we had Aftermath, which wasn't directly before it. And Bloodline came out before Rogue One, and Catalyst is almost required reading for Rogue One. It's like you can get Rogue One without it, but it just fleshes out what's going on so much more.
Yeah, Rebel Rising too.
And Rebel Rising, yeah.
Which came out 6 months later when it shouldn't have.
It should have come out, yeah. But
grump.
But then we have with TLJ in this, we didn't really have a direct lead-in novel. I think the closest lead to a lead-in novel for TLJ was Phasma, which is amazing, but that's really off topic. Yeah. And then we have this, which we had Legends of Luke Skywalker. Yes, well, Legends.
At least to me, I think that this is probably the closest thing to a tie-in novel with TLJ.
Yeah. But even then, though, it's like not specific, to the story. So I guess this feels more like it's functioning like Legends of Luke Skywalker or what have you. It's more of like a context builder than a story builder. That makes sense?
Yeah, exactly. Like that's kind of what I was getting at with Legends of Luke Skywalker is that it doesn't do anything for the actual TLJ story, but it makes you understand kind of what the galaxy perceives Luke Skywalker to be.
Exactly, which is very important.
It adds it adds some context, which is what, the whole point of TLJ was that Luke didn't feel like he was a legend, but he was, so he came back and took that, And I think that this book is I think you're on the right track there with, this book is more of a contextualization than anything.
And from that perspective, I would say the parts of the book that were young Han have me more excited for Solo just because I really liked young Han in this.
Right.
Like young Han it's like more Han Solo than Han Solo was, if that makes any kind of sense. So he was really fun. Like how he's convinced that Sana is in love with him the entire time and that is unfortunately super relatable as a chick on the internet. Where it's just like, oh my gosh, she responded to my comment. She must be in love with me. I was laughing my head off through every one of those chapters. Because I'm like, this is how it works. Like, this is what happens. And like that part has me more excited for Solo. But the rest of it, I think, was just, it's not that it made me more or less. It was just more Star Wars, which is always good in my opinion.
Well, and I think one thing that really kind of got me excited for the movie about the book, and because not necessarily that it's a tie-in novel, but that for me, and again, this is just a personal thing. I'm not saying this has to be the way other people view things, but for me, of the big three of the original trilogy, Han Solo has always been kind of the least interesting. And so I've been looking forward to the Solo movie because I look forward to anything Star Wars, but this book got me excited about Han Solo in a way that I don't know necessarily that I have before. And I can see, Andy, the stuff you were saying about, there are certain things and tones and language. This is not even a thing. There was a lot of contemporary, like, American language in this novel that kind of rubbed me wrong.
It bothered me.
At parts.
And it's not just this novel. Like, even in Legends, when I was reading Legends books and they started using cool, it bothered me. So it's just, and that's just a me problem, I know.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I get where you guys are. It's interesting because I think it's just that, like, contemporary language and whatever. That's just either it bothers you or it doesn't.
Right.
Yeah. And there's no real, like, reason either way why it does or doesn't. Because for me, it's never bothered me. Like, my God, when DJ said boudoir.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
In TOJ, oh my God, there was a week and a half. Like, that was like the thing in one of my Facebook groups.
Yeah.
Like, just people posting over and over and over again. Why do you use French in a Star Wars movie? And then I would always just post a caption. I made a caption photo of Luke Skywalker saying, "We'll meet you at the rendezvous point in Empire Strikes Back." But anyways, you've got the, like, just. For some people it bothers them, and for some people it doesn't. And there's really no way to win, really.
No, there never is.
Because I think that this is me, overgeneralizing and speaking from my own experience. I get really bothered when they come up with stupid other names to explain things, like the refresher. It's a bathroom. It's a restroom.
You
Just
can call I remember reading the Jedi Apprentice novels, which were kids' chapter books about Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, which were amazing. But I remember being really confused because they would call beds the sleep couch. And I just remember for like months, like, what is a sleep couch? And then
I had a futon in college. Is that
right? Is that a sleep? Is that a sleep couch? But I mean, there's the same thing. Like, Django's been reading the X-Wing novels, and I kind of I've read several of them. I kind of reread the first one and then flaked on him. But I always would crack up when I'd read those. 'Cause I'm like, what in the living name of anything is a snap roll? Because I don't know what a snap roll is. And anytime somebody would snap roll, I'm like, that's cool.
It's a really quick roll. It's like a really quick half roll or a quarter roll.
Yeah. But like the language stuff doesn't always bother me. I do remember though, and again, this was not something I got upset about, but in the very opening of The Last Jedi, some people get upset about like the prank call kind of humor. What bothered me is I just kept thinking H is not a letter in Orabish.
You're right. Funny how that would bother me more than anything else.
But even then, like it's a minor thing.
Yeah.
About the alphabet stuff, just one of the many funny times that Pablo was like, sit down on Twitter.
I love Pablo sit downs.
Yeah, somebody like, the X-Wing isn't a thing in Orabesh, and he's like, there's other alphabets.
On Earth.
There you go.
There's other alphabets in Star Wars.
One of my favorite things.
It's so great.
One of my favorite things is like Dave Filoni, who is just such a gift to the Star Wars universe, has been talked about many times. Somebody will ask him like a super technical question, and he'll be like, so is it, especially about pronunciations, he'll be like, in this episode, they said it this way. In this episode, they said it that way. And he gets like this real trollish look on his face. And he's like, and people on Earth pronounce things different ways too. And he like intentionally does it. So like no one.
Yeah, it's like when everybody was like at the Rebels finale Q&A, and he was like, I don't wonder, like, why does everybody want everybody to, like, what's wrong with you people?
Yeah.
I love it so much.
It was so funny. But just little stuff like that. But I think, and I've had a lot of TLJ conversations with people about this too, and I think it's like little things in this book. I think there comes a point where if you really like the subject material, if you really like the base thing that you're reading or watching, you will forgive little things. But if you don't like the base thing you're watching, the little things become worse, right? Mm-hmm. So I think
Yeah.
Where people who didn't like The Last Jedi like fixate on little details. I'm like, why the frick do you care about that little detail? Well, because that detail is a big deal when you didn't like the movie at all. Where there's little things in Rogue One I don't like, but because there's things I do like I can let certain things go, or things in Last Shot that I didn't like. But because I like the book on the whole, I'm like, okay, well, that little thing isn't important because I got this cool thing.
That's a really good point, because like me as a, unapologetic lover of TLJ, there are certain things that I'm like thinking, like, on my 25th rewatch or whatever the hell I'm up to on the movie, there are certain things that I'm like, yeah, that bothers me, but in a couple minutes, this awesome thing's gonna happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And like no, I didn't like the fact that they included time into the fuel space chase situation thing.
Right.
And I really, all due respect to the designers and stuff at Lucasfilm and everything, I can't stand the look of the Praetorian Guards. They look really dumb to me. I really, really hate the Praetorian Guards. But the fight in between them and the Praetorian Guards looks amazing.
Oh, good.
Well,
I have kind of the same thing, but a different scene. I mean, you can see it in my name. Like, Yoda, at the end of the day, is my favorite Star Wars character. I want to grow up one day and be Yoda. Like, it's like a life goal for me. And his characterization in The Last Jedi was perfect. Everything he said was perfect. Everything about his personality was perfect. I honestly, and I can't really articulate why, I hate how the puppet looks in The Last Jedi.
He has chubby cheeks. His like up here is like way,
and he should be. He's not translucent at all, and that kind of bothers me. I don't know, and and I remember seeing the movie for the first time when I wasn't really disliking anything actively, and I went, "Wow, this puppet's terrible." But Yoda's here, so I don't care. I think I was thinking nothing will be worse than the Phantom Menace puppet anyway, and it was fine. Oh, that's puppet! True. That was like Yoda on drugs. Like. I know we're not supposed to like tinkering to the films, but making him digital in the Phantom Menace was the best thing the Blu-rays ever did.
Yeah. I don't know.
So we're at about the hour mark. Is there anything else you want to mention, or anything other thoughts you had about the Last Shot novel before we?
Or any questions from the chat if you guys want to ask any kind of Star Wars question.
I'm not trying to think. I feel like this is very early in the morning for me. Not that I live somewhere where it's early in the morning. It is like 1 p.m. where I'm at. Yep. And but I usually wake up right about now, so my brain is still
coming to terms.
So I know that there's other things I was going to bring up, but I can't.
Well, we can always. There's always room for more discussion later. But
yes, that is true.
And Andy, if you're game, we'll have to have you back another time to talk.
Of course,
sure.
This has been good.
Stuff. But before we wrap it up, do you want to tell the people in the chat a little bit about the stuff you do on the internet?
Yeah, I make moderate quality Star Wars themed internets.
There you go.
My Twitter bio says. You guys can find me on Twitter. That's probably the best way to just do anything. If you guys want to follow what I do YouTube stuff. I do Twitch stuff. I do a podcast once monthly that releases on the first of every month called the Star Cabal Podcast. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, Sunday nights are usually streaming on Twitch, and it's usually a non-stop.
Arkham Asylum. Batman Arkham Asylum, and then for a few hours in the afternoons. And I usually try and get a video up on the channel as well, either a review video, what I call Star Warsology videos, which are kind of like film analysis videos and storytelling analysis videos. Usually I get one of those up, usually around once a week-ish. So if you guys want to check that out, here we go.
Cool. Nolan in the chat said, in the book, were there many references to mentors Han or Lando may have had? I don't think there were any.
I do not recall a single one, which is why I'm a little bit about Solo and why I was kind of put down to the less excited.
Yeah, my pet theory about Solo that is not based on anything, so it is not a spoiler, but my pet theory is that Woody's line about how like trust that, or expect everyone to betray you and you'll never be disappointed. I think that's going to be about as telling as Luke's line of "this is not going to go the way you think" in the Last Jedi trailer.
Every time I see that line in a Solo trailer, it just reminds me of the scene from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where the guy's like, "I told him not to trust anybody, and that meant me too." Haha! Like he didn't think about that one. So.
Yeah.
Fat Bat just asked a question. I'm going to answer it with a picture. Let me find it really quick.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly which picture you're going to show him. I'm just going to get my thought out there while you're looking for that. Yes. Vader. So if I can ask a question, something that has been in my head for a while, did Vader still love Padme after she died? Or at that point, did he fully turn to the dark side when Palpatine told him? Yes. I think that Vader did still love Padme. I think that's how he stayed in the dark side.
Yeah, I think
is in part through his guilt and suffering and pain and self-loathing and hatred for killing Padme, at least as he, deemed it.
And if anything, I think that pushes him further to the dark side once he realizes, and this might be the picture that Jess is going for in the Vader comic, but because he realizes how he's been manipulated, I feel like that makes him want to hate Palpatine. Not want to hate, but makes him hate Palpatine even more. The picture I was thinking about from the Star Wars comic was the one where he realizes that the baby survived and he cracks the glass.
Oh yeah.
That's probably one of my favorite Star Wars moments ever.
Yeah.
Is when he just goes.
Very well. I can show that one too. I never buy comics because I'm cheap. I get them all from the library. And I loved Kieran Gillen's Vader run so much. I bought it all on hardcover because it was so good. But the images I was trying and kind of failing at showing were it's at the very end of the arc, and Vader has been actually captured by this evil scientist guy. And I'm having a hard time flipping and talking, sorry. And Vader's he's caught, and what the guy has done is he's a scientist guy, and he's shut down Vader's suit. So Vader can't do anything because his suit is just immobile, and his mechanical arms are immobile. And Vader goes into his mind and thinks about burning in lava, Padme's death. Padme, is like talking to him in his mind, and his feelings and emotions for Padme make him find this dark side place where he, using the Force, can basically make his suit function, which was absolutely phenomenal. So the things with Padme absolutely continue on after.
That was an inappropriate time to laugh. But Wobot, I have a question. Why did Wobot have to be harmed in the making of Last Shot? That seemed unfair to me. It was unfair, Wobot. Wobot, you've been through too much already. I read the Lando comic. You've been through too much already.
Oh my gosh.
That's such a good comic.
The Lando comic was so good. I'm super behind on comics right now because I get them through trade paperback, but
I know. I'm one of those people where I just wish if the trade paperbacks came out as soon as all of those issues were done instead of 6 months after all those issues were done. Yeah. Because I live as a hermit. I am in a small little town of 4,000 people. Yeah. And the nearest city is 25-minute drive that way-ish. And that city isn't that big and only has maybe 2 comic shops or 3 comic shops maybe. Right. So I don't want to have to go all the way out there to grab to go there and then spend $50 on comics every week.
Right.
Yeah,
whenever we eventually set up a Patreon or something, I think one of our first goals is going to be a Marvel Unlimited account so we can start doing reviews.
Yeah, but the problem is that Marvel Unlimited account, that's only good for you only get the comics 6 months after they're released.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I know. It's God,
that's so dumb.
Just let me subscribe. Even just let me subscribe to the actual and then you can subscribe to each individual line.
It's unlimited except for where it's limited, is what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, you get to read absolutely everything that's 6 months or older.
Right.
Oh well.
And then
How
everyone
dare they
on
want to
Twitter,
make money? Curse
I
it.
feel like I love most of the tight-knit Star Wars Twitter community, but it really bothers me that everyone assumes that we all get the comic issues on the day they come out, and then we just tweet the best panels. It's just like, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope, that's fine. I wanted to know that ahead of time. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Although I've got to say though, that's one that I got in is because I saw the Vader crack glass, or no, I saw it was the Vader panel with I'm surrounded by his fear and dead men from Vader down.
Right.
That was the first. That was the first. That was a panel that I saw on Twitter. I got to get into this.
Yeah.
And immediately, went to Barnes and Noble and bought, 1 billion trade paperbacks.
Yep. No, I haven't gotten into Soul's new Vader run. I keep meaning to. It's just been a time thing, because I've been told it's phenomenal. But I liked Gillen's Darth Vader run quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's also what's his name?
Maul, because Maul has one.
No, not what's his name. Soul. He just teased on Twitter what the next arc is going to be.
Right.
It's going to be Vader's castle and how he got Vader's castle.
Right.
Which I'm really, so now I'm like, ugh, I really need to get caught up now.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I got here.
Yep, I think that's all I got on the last shot.
Yep, and I agree with Fat Batman on Kylo Ren anything. I'll just take Kylo Ren anything.
I feel like we're going to get a lot more of that type of stuff as soon as episode
once 9 is out. Yeah.
But
yeah.
I completely agree.
We will get a flood of content.
But if you're not already, make sure you go subscribe and follow our pal Andy on all the things. And while you're at it, if for some reason you're not already, make sure you subscribe and follow us on all the things too. I don't know why you would be here if you weren't. But lots of good
at you,
stuff.
Fat Batman. I know you came from. I know. I got your number.
And for the record, Fat Batman, Django is probably a bigger Batman fan than a Star Wars fan. So
this is a true statement. So
for the record,
I'm losing credibility now among some people, but yeah, that is true.
How dare you enjoy things you like?
I have more Star Wars Funko Pops, if that means anything. But yeah, so make sure you follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Check out our forums and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you're following Star Wars Ramblings on YouTube, on Twitter, on Twitch, and you're subscribed to his podcast on iTunes as well. There's a lot of good sort of our size Star Wars creators out there. It's not just about Wikipedia and StarWars.com. Make sure you're following some of these other creators out there. There's a really good community of Star Wars fans and Star Wars content creators on Twitter especially. And so make sure you're plugged into that community just because it's fun. Like, if for no other reason, just because most of these people are nice and it's fun to do. But I think that's going to do it for us today. We'll be back next week. Hopefully with another StreamCast on Thursday again. We'll continue our 1 week streak, and we'll make it so
close to Solo.
Make it 2 next week. Yeah, we are getting pretty close. But I think that's going to do it for us today, guys. So thanks again to Andy, and we will see you next week.
Take care.